Even if you're one of those who believes the idea of a monarchy is an anachronistic notion in the modern age, you can't help but mourn the passing of Queen Elizabeth. I'm Barkha Dutt, you're with the Mojo Story. Our focus today is on how the United Kingdom and much of the world is mourning the passing of a monarch, a remarkable woman who saw in her lifetime 15 prime ministers from Winston Churchill to Liz Truss. But even as the country and much of the world mourns what is being called the end of the Elizabethan era, the question now is whether the monarchy can actually survive the death of Queen Elizabeth. Can King Charles III, as he now be called, have the same sort of following as his mother did? Or will the anti royalists now be heard louder and clearer in the United Kingdom, and indeed in large parts of the Commonwealth, including here in India, where the shadows of post-colonialism are still very long? Remember, we just in fact changed the name here in India of Rajpath. So a lot to unpack here with a very, very distinguished panel who is joining us, from the United Kingdom. Let me introduce all of them. Lord Rami Ranger is with us. Welcome to the program, sir. We're also delighted to have back with us Pranav Bhanot, lawyer and councillor. Also joining us is author of the extremely successful book, also adapted into a movie, Victoria and Abdul, Shrabani Basu. Great to see you. Shruti Kapila, well-known historian at Cambridge University, is back with us. And also joining us is Nicholas Nugent, who's, of course, a journalist and has been an editor at the BBC. Great to see you, all of you. Let me start with you, Lord Rami Ranger. Obviously, Queen Elizabeth was loved. The same, however, is not necessarily going to be true for the institution of the monarchy. If you had to define the mood in the United Kingdom right now, obviously beyond the sense of loss, how would you describe it, sir?
I think it's the end of a glorious era. Her Majesty the Queen was unique. There will be nobody like her to replace her. She was a public servant who served people with love, with care, and with empathy for 70 odd years. And she was the longest serving monarch. I have lived under her reign for over 52 years, and I have seen lots of changes brought to the United Kingdom. She was a champion of multiculturalism. She wanted to be the queen of every faith. She would visit gurdwaras, temples, mandirs, mosques, or churches. She wanted to represent every subject, every citizen. She was also head of nearly 14 or 15 countries also, and she was also very passionate about Commonwealth. Commonwealth to her was like her family. She went out of the way to keep the family of Commonwealth. In fact, the Commonwealth countries have grown since she became the in charge of. But she was very pragmatic. She knew that unfortunately one day she'll have to bid for farewell to us all. So she was grooming Prince Charles right from the day one. And a couple of years ago, he was made the head of Commonwealth just to give him head start. But having said that, Prince Charles, I have worked with Prince Charles as a fellow of Princess Trust. He is also very passionate about the people of this country. This royal family is very unique. They have served in battlefield. Would you believe Prince Andrew was in Falkland War and Prince William was in Afghan War? So yet they are not king like absolute monarch wielding a lot of power, but they are public figure. They're people. They're very dignified people, but yet not remote from their subject.
So you believe, Lord Rami Ranger, that King Charles will be able to carry the legacy of his mother?
100%, 100%. He is a very, very decent human being, very ahead of his time. Sometimes he has a concern for the environment, concern for the building, architect, all these things. So people have beginning to realize that this gentleman is not just an ordinary king. He takes interest in the lives of people and what goes on around us. So I think the monarchy is very, very strong. It's been evolving over 1,000 years to reach to this level where the whole world loves the British monarchy. And Queen, wherever she goes, she receives rapturous welcome. Children from different countries will bring hand-picked flower to give to the Queen. That just shows the affection people have held
So
for much today.
you're clearly a signed up royalist, as it were, and you feel an optimism that that legacy will continue.
It is
Uh,
because of the king and the queen.
Yeah,
Britain
got
can
that.
punch well above
Let
its
me just
weight.
take your comments to the others now. Let me get in Shrabani, Basu, and then Shruti, and then we'll go around the panel. Shrabani, if you look at the fact that there is not a single mean word, that is being said about the Queen, that isn't just a cultural politeness that you don't actually say anything, even vaguely clinical when somebody dies. She was genuinely loved. She was genuinely seen as somebody who, for all her faults that we know from mostly Netflix series like The Crown, and some chronicles of Lady Diana, she was somebody who was very, respected. Her son, and indeed other members of the royal family, do not quite have the same following. You have the Jeffrey Epstein scandal that has reached the doors of the palace. You have countries like India, we just changed names. We just changed the name of Rajpath, constantly urging a breaking from our colonial past. How does this sit in today's age, the monarchy after Elizabeth?
So, Barka, there's two sides to this. So, in Britain, it sits very well. I mean, I've actually just come back from Buckingham Palace, went around looking at those, the floral tributes, and I was asking people about what they thought. Exactly this, Prince Charles, what next? And there were people sitting around that Victoria Memorial, waiting for Prince Charles to come in, just hoping that they would get a glimpse of him. So there were messages saying "Long live the King," which sort of surprised me a bit. I must say that it's actually rolling off the tongue quite easily now. I think yesterday everyone was finding it really hard to just adjust to the idea of even saying King Charles III. It was difficult, but I think in Britain, yes, I think the monarchy is still there. I think they love their royal family mostly. I mean, even the hardest of Republicans melt, when they are asked to come and meet, see the Queen. I have seen it over and over again. It does happen. But it will, obviously, it's not, he has a huge task ahead of him. Living up to the expectations that came with the Queen is not going to be easy. He's going to face 100 hurdles. But,
How would you describe him as essentially different from his mother? One aspect.
well, of course, he's pretty blunt. He says what he wants, and he's often, pretty controversial for it. The other thing is that, well, we have the whole Diana saga that will never go away. So, there is always that in the back of people's minds. Every time there's a Netflix series, it sort of comes back again. There is always that. There's no getting rid of that. This was the 25th death anniversary of Diana. So, two very iconic figures there, both the Queen and Diana. There are various other things. The Commonwealth is tricky. We saw what happened when William and Kate went for their Commonwealth tour. It wasn't pleasant. They came back red faced because just the
Yeah.
media, everything was really went wrong. So they've got to learn. But the one thing this family does is learn very quickly. They are clever at keeping up, which is why they have survived. That is why the monarchy has survived. They adapt. So I think as far as Britain goes, they will stand. They will continue.
So,
There
so
is
the
no
question,
doubt.
the question, Shruti, is what about the rest of the world? We saw murmurs of somewhat caustic remarks from a number of people from Africa, for instance. I was scouring my social media timeline, Shruti, and there were people who said, "Well, if we were the Queen's subjects, we're allowed to have an opinion." In India, there's a paradox. We have a one-day mourning, but we've had a week of the Prime Minister urging India to lose symbols and names of our colonial past. And what does the Commonwealth even mean? You have authors like Amitav Ghosh, for example, who have refused to accept awards from the Commonwealth because he doesn't recognize the very entity of the Commonwealth. So these are all the paradoxes, Shruti. How do you decode these paradoxes?
No, thank you, Barkha. And you should see Irish Twitter, I mean, which is absolutely abrasive about what is going on.
Yeah.
So I quite agree with you that it's actually a telling moment. It's going to be a bit of a moment, especially for the so called Commonwealth. Because what is the Commonwealth but a club of people who were colonized by the British? I mean, there is no other meaning. Sure, there are other African nations who want to come and join. Also, quite recently, die-hard, countries which had the monarch as its head became republican in the West Indies. So I actually think if India wants to kind of really stage its, end of imperial, talk that it's giving. I mean, Modi's thing was a bit rich, given that the Rajpath was already renamed. It was Kingsway. It had already gone, as it had already been decolonial. Now, actually, India should walk out of the Commonwealth. After all, Nehru was significant in disallowing India to become to have the Queen as the head of state, right? Like Australia, Canada. This is despite his friendship with the Mountbattens, and Mountbatten lost this very, very important battle, which he had single-handedly come for. But I also think India should now show the lead and disband this club, which is archaic, which only refers to a very actually painful past for most of the world. And I think it should cut its ties with this monarch. And I also think that I just wanted to say that, I mean, I think Shrabani is absolutely right that the British love the monarchy, but I think it comes and goes. I wasn't here in the 80s or even much of the 90s. I think the monarchy was given a totally new life by Tony Blair when after Diana's death. And so I think I mean, I think this is a difficult moment. I wouldn't be so sanguine. Yes, there are people out there. I mean, she's a much loved monarch and a kind of matriarch of the nation. She has sort of been steadfast over a turbulent time in world history. But I think Charles, precisely because he tends to be quite intervening, seems to have very strong views. I'm not sure how this is going to go down.
Yeah, very interesting, and I'm very sort of taken by the boldness of the argument that India should walk out of the Commonwealth. Of course, I don't see it happening. I think today it's more seen as a kind of geopolitical almost organization. No one in India certainly regards the Queen as our head of state, and in fact, there's constant talk across political alignments, political sort of aisles about reparations that the British owe the Indian people. Pranav, Lord Rami Ranger, you wear a kind of dualism in your identity. You're from the Republic of India that won its Azadi from the British, and then you have the titular head of the Queen and now King Charles III. How do you make sense of it, Pranav?
Well, I was actually born in London, so for me, the Queen has been my constant. Apart from my parents and my grandparents, the only other constant beyond that is, for me, the Queen. But I think there are massive shoes to fill. When I met her,
those are pictures of you meeting her. Yeah, go ahead.
When I met her in Lambeth Palace, I was very surprised with actually how small she was, but how much command she had of a room, and just how polite she was when I spoke with her. But I think that the question is, I'm in my early 30s, so I see the millennial generation, and I also kind of have an insight as to the generations above me. And one of the points you touch on very well is, how does a royal family become and maintain being relevant in the future? And I'm very alive to that fact. And I think some of the points have been made. I think actually the royal family should be above politics. Don't get too involved in politics. I think that will be a big move. I think Prince Charles may have got himself into a bit of hot water when doing that. I think they need to learn quickly, and they do learn quickly. And I think that will always be a big asset for the new monarchy. But, also being relevant to the new generation, being on social media, getting involved in kind of social initiatives, which they're very good at, but I think it needs to carry on. Because, when I look at my sons and who are very young and the teenagers, they don't see, in my view, the monarchy in the same way as my grandparents or my parents.
How do they see it?
Well, it's a changing world order. This idea of authority doesn't always hold as strong when the generations are a bit younger. So in my view, and I think the royal family are very alive to this, one of the big changes that we will see is that the monarchy is probably going to be slightly smaller. There's going to be a smaller number of working royals. So these aren't new things that the royal family have identified. I think they have a very strategic plan in place, but it's not going to just be enough to be the royal family and therefore we're relevant. I think there needs to be a continuum of initiatives, of PR, of all sorts of social work being done to attract the 13, 14, 15-year-olds to ensure that not only is King Charles going to be popular, but King William will also be popular.
I think that's a great line there. That's not going to be enough to just be royal, but also I'm struck by the fact that, you're of the vintage where the Queen is your only constant, and maybe Lord Rami Ranger has memories of our colonial past. But let me bring in Nicholas for a kind of a perspective that, all of us with our sort of dual identities and histories, not me, I'm purely Indian, I don't have any dualism. But Nicholas, what's your perspective?
Well, and I can also remember a time before the Queen, so I'm giving a bit of ageism there.
I read an article in The Atlantic yesterday, a brilliant article that said that the Queen was older than nylon, older than Scotch tape. So now you're telling me of a time before the Queen, and I think I'm just going to fall
Yes.
off my chair. But go ahead. Yes.
I shouldn't have admitted that to start with. But it makes me very conscious that the vast majority of British people have known no other monarch. So that's why for them, this is really quite a shell shock, you could say, because they don't know what happens. Now, I'm not pretending I do, because I was pretty small at the time that the Queen took over. But one key point I want to make is that, remember, the most important person in Britain today, in terms of international affairs, national affairs, or whatever, is the Prime Minister. Let's not forget that. It's the Prime Minister who's important. Now, our misfortune is that we have changed our Prime Minister and our head of state in the same week. And one can hardly envisage that happening ever. So let's not get it out of perspective. Yes, it's a big shock to the system when the monarchy, with all the stability that it implies, changes hands. Let's put it like that. But the more significant point is that we have a new Prime Minister who is basically doing her best to manage the changeover between heads of state. But all this talk of the monarchy must adapt, the monarchy must cut down to size. Yes, yes, yes. But it has been happening over the years. And really, you cannot easily identify anything that is in the power of the monarch to the exclusion of the elected authority, if you see what I mean. It's a symbolic monarchy, important nonetheless, important, and providing that stability that's been referred to. But the business of government, the business of running the nation happens day to day, and it just is unfortunate that our Prime Minister has only been in that role for 3 days. But if one is testing the transition, I would say the evidence so far in less than 24 hours is that it's working rather well.
Yeah. Well, the tough questions aren't being asked yet. People are still in mourning. Shruti, I could see you wanting to come in there, and then Shrabani, and then Lord Rami Ranger. Go ahead, Shruti.
I know, just a very brief point that actually it evolved really as a form of a celebrity. I mean, what you have in the royal house is a kind of cult of entertainment, global iconicity, and the cult of celebrity. And to that extent, actually, Prince Charles doesn't quite fit the mold either. I mean, King Charles, rather, Charles III. But, and maybe Prince William might do, I'm not sure. But also the royal family has amassed, I just read in the Times today, a personal kind of its assets have gone up to the tune of £1 billion. So this is not exactly just a house of pure duty and pure stepping away from, as it were, the grubbiness of politics and and the business of earning money and the like. So I actually think I don't see a big Republican sentiment in this country, but I definitely think that it would be harder, like Pranav mentions, to find that kind of deference that both the Queen commanded and the royal house has commanded for some time.
And I'm glad you raised this point about the money that it takes to keep the royals royal. Shrabani, if I can bring you in, this is an economic crisis. It's, Nick spoke about being the same week with the monarch and the prime minister change. It's also a time in the United Kingdom where the thing that's on the top of most people's minds is the energy bills. What winter's going to be like, and at this time to see the kind of ceremonial spend of the royals, is that like a welcome distraction to people who want to feel good and feel the country is still whole and regal, or is it that they're like, hey, what about us? We're really struggling to live here.
It's bit of both, because all these, we saw the platinum jubilee, so it's something that you have a lot of spending that goes on, but it gives a little bit of a feel good factor in the middle of all the doom and gloom. And let's face it, all these big palaces aren't easy to heat either. I mean, the heating bills would be astronomical there.
Yeah.
But I think Prince Charles is cares a bit about the environment, so we might hear something from him. We might, but yes, I mean, Liz Truss made her, announcement yesterday, which just went. I mean, nobody knows what happened, because obviously there was, the Queen's news took over. So I think as time passes, we're going to have this for 10 days. There is mourning, there will be the funeral. I think things will be at a sort of hyper end of this spectacle for some time, and then naturally, real life kicks in. It's going to be the bills,
Yeah.
and we'll see how it goes. But I think the royals, what Pranav said, they have to just keep up. They have to have their nose on the ground if they want to survive. And it's not just going to be the vogue and I mean, that is part of their attraction. That's part of their tourist attraction, the dresses they wear, what they, the places they eat, what they do. Part of the gossip columns that sells newspapers is the spat between the royal family and
Yeah.
everything else that happens. So let's not forget there is that whole world going on.
And that's the point. They're a great story. They're a great story. They're like Jane Austen's, Pride and Prejudice recast for the modern age. They are completely that, right? And Lord Rami Ranger, even when there's a spat, it's a good story. So when, Harry and Meghan pack up and they go and they say, we're just going to, try to live a life outside of royalty, there's still interest because it's a good story. And the thing with Charles is that often, despite the fact that he has all the elements, in fact, a great love story, some would say he and Camilla are a greater love story than any other love story. Look at how long they've lasted. He's not seen to be a good story. Lord Rami Ranger, do you have to respond? Do you want to respond to that?
I think, Barkha, you have to see the whole world is now focused on Her Majesty's story, the funeral arrangement, all this thing. This would not happen if it was just an ordinary human being. The Queen brings unity among the people. She is enormously respected by the armed forces. She is the commander, the colonel in chief of Army, Air Force, and Navy, and the soldier take commission and they take allegiance to Her Majesty the Queen. She is above party politics, and millions of visitors come to pay their respect to Buckingham Palace. They come, the pageantry and the souvenirs which we generate. The Queen is the monarchy is a money spinner. I don't know why people think they cost money. In fact, they generate wealth for Great Britain. Apart from the respect they bring in the world, nobody will respect Great Britain if they did not have the king or the Queen, because we are punching well above our weight. A small island.
You actually think that it's the royalty that gives the UK its place on the global map?
100%, because people accept the Queen as the head of the Commonwealth. They will not accept any ordinary person from Jamaica or Ghana. So therefore, the unity of Commonwealth is going to have a lot more meaning now that we are out of the common market. We have left the Brexit. We are now paying more attention to the Commonwealth. We are giving a lot of aid to the Commonwealth. Commonwealth benefit from Britain. I mean, these are ceremonial heads. They are not absolute monarch. They are
okay. Let me take a very interesting argument immediately to Nicholas, who actually said, "Hey, let's not forget it's the Prime Minister who's the most powerful person in the UK." And you have Lord Rami Ranger actually saying the UK wouldn't figure in the world's imagination without the monarchs.
Well, I would agree. I would agree that they're a great tourist attraction, and one should overlook that. But I wouldn't agree with the second part, that they are the reason that Britain has status in the world. I mean, one could mention, well, a lot of things one could mention, including nuclear weapons. There are a lot of reasons why the UK has stature in the world, and I hope it will continue to do so. But I would certainly agree that the monarchy, a reasonably successful monarchy, let's look at it like that, contributes quite a lot to the stature of Britain in the world. I mean, you wouldn't be having this discussion if another European royal had passed.
Absolutely. That's true. It's actually the only monarchy in the world that gets this attention. There are other monarchs in the world and they don't get this attention, and that's true. Sorry, Nicholas, complete your point. Lord Rami Ranger to respond briefly, and Pranav and Shrabani with last comments. Go ahead, Nicholas, complete your point.
Well, I really made the point. The point is that the royal family or the monarch contributes to Britain's stature in the world, but it's not based solely upon that. And about the points made earlier about the Commonwealth, I mean, you could argue that the Commonwealth is in decline as a organization of significance. Again, it's not. It doesn't really take decisions. It's not really nearly as important as something like NATO or the Quad, for example, in terms of alliances between countries. And yeah, I mean, it's a memory of the past. But I mean, very significantly, it is the Commonwealth rather than the Empire. It's already in the process of declining as relevance in today's modern world.
That's a great point. Let me get Lord Ranger to respond briefly, and then Pranav's been waiting a long time. Lord Ranger, the Commonwealth is a declining group.
It was declining because we joined the European community, but now we have left it. We are paying a lot more focus on Commonwealth, and there's a lot more business to be had in Commonwealth, because Commonwealth depends a great deal on United Kingdom because of the historical roots. We know each other. We have fought in both the great wars. We also, citizens of Commonwealth, came to rebuild United Kingdom after devastating wars. So our relationship with these country is very unique and very special. It's taken a year to build it. It will take 5 minutes to destroy it. But it hasn't been disappeared in 75 years. It's not going to go any time soon.
So whole diverse range of opinions here. Pranav, speak as the millennial that you are. The Commonwealth, what does it mean today? You have countries like Barbados today who are rejecting the idea of the Queen and now, the King as the head of their nation. This is a changing world. This is a post-Brexit United Kingdom. It's a post-colonial, post-imperial Commonwealth. Even if the Commonwealth is seen as a kind of organization of nations, the intent and the hierarchy within it will now be regarded very differently than in the past.
Yeah, and I think we're seeing that in the West Indies, as you've rightly said. As somebody living in the UK, the Commonwealth has really made two big impacts on me. The first is watching the Commonwealth Games. The second is learning about trade with Commonwealth countries, as Lord Ranger has said. And actually, I guess there's a third. I love going to many of the Commonwealth countries on holiday, on vacation. But in all honesty, beyond that, perhaps it's because I've always been born and bred in London. That's been about as much exposure as I've had to the Commonwealth. And you can understand why some countries are taking the stance that they are in the Caribbean. I love the monarchy. Doesn't mean everyone has to love the monarchy. And I think we are in a changing world. And I think it goes back to the point I said. The monarchy have to actively and intentionally remain relevant.
What's the one thing you'd like to see them doing to remain relevant?
Well, I would like them to appeal to not my generation, but I would say people in their teens and early 20s, because that is the future of this country. And they are the people that may not have the same affinity to the royal family as people like myself and people older than me. And if they can focus their energies to that demographic, I feel that we have a very long and very successful number of kings and queens ahead of us.
Shrabani, let me give you the last word. You say so far it seems to be working. There's a great deal of sentimentalism at the gates of Buckingham Palace. But, and Charles, to be fair to him, has been ahead of the curve on issues such as climate change, environmental rights, even organic farming, the idea of food to table, all of that. But what sort of king do you think he'll set out to be? And could he bring his family together? Because this is a family that is fractured. That's what makes them so interesting and followed. But it also makes them weak and non-credible in a way that the Queen was never sullied, personally.
It's not going to be easy. His sons are at war with each other. One of them, Harry, is saying things against his own father. So I think that the first thing he'll have to do is also get his house organized, just, make sure that the family come together, which hopefully they will, because I don't think it's pleasant for anyone to watch a family tear itself apart publicly. It's very awkward. So I think he would need to work not just on his, his work duties. He would also need to work on the personal life, make sure his family is together, make sure that things work on that end, hold it together. Well, we'll see what he does. I don't think he's going to be very popular at the Commonwealth, so he has to really work hard on that one. They have to see how they can be relevant. I think it's fine for Commonwealth countries to opt out and say the Queen, not the Queen anymore, the King is no longer the head of state, because that's absolutely fine. India was the first country to become a republic, and India is one of the strongest members of the Commonwealth. It is the biggest in numbers. So I don't think that is relevant. I think they should just focus on trade, education, human rights, do something. This was a Commonwealth that was so active when, anti-apartheid. They could do it all those years ago. If they want to do something, if they want to work in the right direction, they could. It's important. The trade is important. Little islands, their banana trade. I believe one Commonwealth person said, their whole livelihood depends on this export of bananas, little islands, and we've got to, make sure that this trade works. So there are little things that they can
and also sees the big ideal, as you mentioned with apartheid. That's a great thought. We'll have to leave it there. Sorry, you will have to leave it there. We're out of time. Lord Rami Ranger, Shrabani Basu, Pranav Bhanot, Nicholas Nugent, and earlier to Dr. Shruti Kapila. Thank you. As they say, watch this space. You're going to hear a lot of "The Queen is dead, God save the King" in the days to come. And let's see how that one goes. Thank you very much. Take care and see you tomorrow.
It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.